Go ahead.
Dr. Paul here. Welcome to another Sunday afternoon live with y'all, the world. Dr. Paul. So today, actually probably tomorrow, I uploaded my latest book, COVID-19 Life-Saving Strategies the Media Won't Tell You. And this book has sort of been an effort of passion because I had a very close friend, Bud, who was hospitalized, almost died from COVID-19. And he was put in isolation before I knew that he was even sick. I mean, this all happened very quickly, about 3-4 weeks ago. When I heard about it, I'm going, oh no, there are things you can do. Of course, everybody's hearing on the news, hands to face, no. This human spacing is somewhat important if you're indoors where people are coughing and sneezing, for example. But it's mostly direct touch to your face, hand washing, avoiding contact, that sort of thing. But there's so much you can do, and I've put it all down in this book that I want you to be able to get. It will be on Kindle in the next 24 hours. It'll be on a paperback on Amazon in the next week. We're just reviewing the proofs tomorrow, and I am going to also offer it to those of you who know me and are already connected to me for free. So this will be, just go to Dr. Paul Approved, DrPaul approved.com, and you can request the book. I think you can actually do that now. So get your free copy. I want you to have this. I want you to share it with your loved ones because there are concrete things you can do. First of all, to boost your immune system. What does it take to be healthy? I mean, I talk to my patients about this all the time. It takes a healthy immune system. And as you hear the hysteria on the news about, oh, we have to get a vaccine, we can't go back to work until we have a vaccine. Actually, as soon as we have enough people immune to this thing, we can all go back to life as usual. And what makes this one tricky is that it's so new, right? This was the release of a brand new virus that, whether it was accidental or whatever, I don't know, but our immune systems had never seen this, and so every single human on the planet Earth has to now develop immunity. Now, if we all got exposed at once, because it is a more dangerous than most viruses, then we were going to overwhelm our health system. So this was the whole rationale between flatten the curve and all of that. I get it. But the real solution is going to be that most children, 80% or more, have mild or no symptoms at all. Those can be the people, those children, young adults, people who are healthy, can provide herd immunity even if we don't get a vaccine. Because the problem is, making a vaccine for this specific virus is riddled with landmines. I mean, it is potentially a disaster. So while we're going to hope that the scientists can figure something out that's wonderful and safe and effective, we need to make sure they test it with long-term safety. The real problem is that you need to be exposed a subsequent season, because most of the problems with vaccines against MERS or SARS have been the fact that animals vaccinated, when next exposed, die. I mean, it's really, really rough. It seems like they cannot make a safe vaccine. So the warriors, many of you watching today, if you are healthy, if you are young, hopefully you will have already had this infection, developed an immune response. You can now be part of the herd that protects everybody else who's vulnerable. Those who are vulnerable, those who are very old, those who have underlying health conditions, we need you to stay quarantined, stay safe, because at this time, this virus is worrisome enough that we don't want you to get it. So do everything you can to avoid getting it, absolutely. And the rest of us, we want to do everything we can not to take it to you. We've got to respect this virus, but we don't need to fear it, because you can boost your immune system. And I go over all the things: vitamin C, vitamin D, N-acetylcysteine to boost your glutathione, melatonin. Believe it or not, children might be largely spared because their melatonin levels are way high compared to even late teens and early adulthood. And by the time you're an old guy like me, your melatonin levels are like flatlined. Old people can't sleep. Melatonin. It's a great antioxidant, but it also does a lot of things specifically in the immune system, leveling out the overreaction that happens with COVID-19. So what I'm going to do is take a lot of your questions, go look for the book, stay tuned. I just read an article. This information came out after I'd already submitted this book, out of Santa Clara, California. This was a well-done study by a team at Stanford, and they looked at the seroconversion of the population in Santa Clara County. Here's what they found, folks. They found that probably 50 to 80 times as many people had been exposed and developed an immune response to this virus than they thought. And it took, when you took that into consideration, it took the mortality, the death rate, down to about 0.1 to 0.2%. That's along the same lines of mortality from a bad flu season. Now, this illness is a bad one, right? I mean, we're seeing, my friend Bud, just talked to him last night, had dinner with him. He's like 3.5, 4 weeks out, and he still gets short of breath. This thing hits you hard for some people. He's in his mid-60s. And so we've got to respect it. Oh, I'm not trying to minimize it whatsoever. But it appears, since we have not been testing the population at large to see what percentage are developing immunity, that we may have a larger percentage than we thought. Now, whether it's going to end up being 2, 5, 10, 20% of us who have developed immunity this first go-around, that remains to be seen, and it's probably dependent on where you live, right? Rural areas that didn't see this virus at all, you won't have immunity. If you lived in a city that just got massively overwhelmed with COVID-19, the amount of immunity in that community may be rather high. So, lots to figure out. I'm not here just to talk about COVID-19. Sorry, I know it's been dominating the news, so I just wanted to start with that. Plus, I have the book that I'm bringing out to the world and wanted you to be aware of that. But we are going to take your questions today, and I'll do my best to try to repeat the questions because my producer reads them off and then I respond, and you don't hear his readings as easily. So I'll do my best to respond. Remember, anything I say here, check it. Double check it with your healthcare provider. This is an informational, educational format, not a format in where I'm going to diagnose and treat. I thank you all for tuning in, and I look forward to getting your questions.
Super chat from MD Nizamuddin.
Hey, MD Nizamuddin.
Hi, Dr. Paul. I love your videos. Love from India.
Love from India. It's so great that we get to connect around the world. And I'm really praying for people in India, people who are in countries that may not have the ability to take additional supplements if you need them, to socially isolate if you can. I wonder about our homeless and the folks who have less resources. As a world, we do need to band together and choose to share love and support.
Del Marie Charlene. Is a thyroid condition an underlying health condition that is dangerous?
Is a thyroid condition underlying condition that's dangerous? That has not traditionally been listed as one of the conditions you worry about with COVID. I would say most of the thyroid folks that I take care of have their thyroid managed, so it's not really an issue. So if you were in the midst of a thyroid storm or you were just diagnosed being severely hypothyroid, that would certainly have some implications on your immune system, but you can get that balanced very quickly. So get that balanced and you should be fine.
Leslie Richardson asks, how do you know if you even have the coronavirus?
So Leslie's asking, how do you know if you have the coronavirus? I go over the symptoms of COVID-19 infection in my book. The number one symptom seems to be fever. Over 80 to 90% of people will have fever. You often have body aches. You can have a cough. Only 5% have a cold, that runny nose you see with a typical winter cold-like illness. And then there's all sorts of less common GI symptoms. About 1 in 5 people will have vomiting, diarrhea, nausea, poor appetite. There's a little bit of loss of smell, loss of taste, sort of sensation issues, sensory issues. These are, more and more stories are coming out of how this virus appears to be attacking our immune system, our neurosystem, but predominantly it's a whole body, like the worst flu of your life minus the congestion.
Super chat from Bridget.
Thank you, Bridget.
Is asthma contagious?
Asthma is not contagious. So asthma is a reaction at the level of the lungs, and there are two things happening. Initially, if you think of your trachea and then your bronchiole, the smaller tubes that go to all your air sacs in your lungs, They constrict, sorry, when hit with something that you're allergic to. It tends to be an infection, dust, mold, cats, dogs, oftentimes environmental things that will trigger a spasm of those muscles, and it makes it hard to exhale. So you can usually inhale, you can't get the air out. Now, if you're having an asthma attack for longer than 6 to 8 hours or a day or two, you get inflammation, and now your cough gets mucousy. But it is absolutely not contagious.
Elizabeth Williams asks or says, my son has pancreatic insufficiency. Is he considered high risk?
So is pancreatic insufficiency putting you at high risk? I would say possibly a little. That's not one of the conditions, again, that I'm seeing listed. However, with pancreatic insufficiency, one of the big challenges is absorbing your nutrients. So I would really focus in that instance of getting the key nutrients you need to boost your immune system. I talked about them at the very beginning of this show today. Vitamin C is especially important. Make sure you're not vitamin D deficient. A little bit of vitamin A for a few days to a week. You don't want to overdose too high on vitamin A. The N-acetylcysteine, glutathione, vitamin E. These things are covered. You want to eat the rainbow, eat healthy food. If you're boosting your immunity with natural foods, you should be fine.
Britt Cat says, thank you, Dr. Paul, for giving us parents information that we can trust.
Thank you, Britt. Appreciate it.
Becky Matlack says, would the antibodies from breast milk be helpful with COVID-19?
Absolutely. Would the antibodies from breast milk help with COVID-19? All you need to get through life is duct tape and breast milk. That's a little joke, but it's almost true. Breast milk is so filled with life-promoting, immune-boosting substances, including antibodies. Now, obviously, most people won't have antibodies specific against COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, because it's a novel, brand new virus none of us have seen. So in that sense, no, your breast milk isn't going to infer protection to that newborn. In fact, there was just a study published that I've included in my PowerPoint that you're going to all see soon as well. That's coming, where it shows that infants in particular, so we've heard that kids are pretty protected against this virus, but not infants. So I would treat a newborn or those first few months of life as someone who is higher risk, even if you're breastfeeding.
Lisa Sunday wants to know if multiple sclerosis puts you at higher risk.
Is multiple sclerosis putting you at higher risk? Multiple sclerosis I don't think of as an immune, well, okay, this brings up an interesting point. The whole constellation of autoimmune conditions, of which multiple sclerosis is one. Type 1 diabetes is autoimmune against the pancreatic islet cells. There are lots and lots and lots of autoimmune conditions. I think we do need to be careful, because if you've got one autoimmune condition and we're not totally sure that COVID-19 might also involve some autoimmunity here. So I would say yes, be extra careful, but it's not the traditional heart, lungs, kidneys, diabetes, obesity. Those are the biggies for putting you at high risk. But definitely, I wouldn't go out and purposefully get exposed. Let's put it that way. This idea like maybe someday we're going to go, all right, we're not going to get a safe vaccine. Let's get the youngest people, the healthiest people exposed. If you've got an autoimmune condition, if you've got MS, no. You're going to just quarantine faithfully and let the rest of the herd provide the protection.
Kelly Fogg says, does forgetting K2 negate vitamin D's effectiveness?
So K2 with vitamin D. You know, for the longest time I didn't know about K2. I was just taking vitamin D3. I still think it's of great value to take your D3. The importance of K2 is this. K2 helps you usher the added calcium that you absorb due to your D3 that you're taking and store it in the bone. And there's some mixed studies about risk and benefits with taking vitamin D3 supplements that I think would the dangers or the risk side of it would go away if you had D3 with K2. That's just a personal feeling I have, knowing how D3 works and how K2 helps usher that calcium where it belongs. So I recommend you take D3 with K2, but if you're taking moderate or small doses of D3 and it doesn't have K2, don't worry. Your benefits, I'm sure, outweigh the risk. And certainly at this time of possible COVID, D3 in moderation is a good idea. Now, if you don't have an infection, you can take high dose for a few days to kind of boost your D3, but then go to a moderate dose. For kids, that would be 1,000. For adults, that would be no more than 4,000 or 5,000 IUs per day. Yeah.
Janari asks, what do you think about opening up America again?
Hey, Janari, good question. What do I think about opening up America again? I think it should absolutely start happening, but depending on what's going on in your community. You don't want to open up New York yet. That's clear. Even though it looks like they've peaked, their hospitals are still filled. Their healthcare workers are still like, man, they're working hard. My heart goes out to all you frontline healthcare workers who are in the trenches in the places hardest hit. It's rough, okay? No, you can't open up in New York City. But where I live in Portland, Oregon, I'm looking at the trends and we're getting near the end of the tail. So within 2 to 4 weeks, we should absolutely be opening up. If you live in a rural county where there are no cases, why wouldn't you open up? You know what I mean? The people at high risk should still quarantine. You quarantine until you know it's safe because people are still going to travel, right? As we start opening up here and there, somebody who has this virus is going to move to a place that's opened up and you're going to get exposed. So, those who can handle the exposure, the young, the healthy, you should be getting back to work if you're in a very low risk area where this thing is about done. Remember, this is a winter virus. Coronaviruses are cold and flu-like winter viruses, and you can see this pattern, that bell-shaped curve. It's interesting. It's not so much flattening in terms of like you squish it and it goes out this way. So now you're going to have COVID for another year because we flattened it. I think the flattening of the curve basically just means you don't have as high a peak. But you're going to have a bell-shaped curve, and when it's going, and you can see this town after town, city after city, country after country. You can look at these bell-shaped curves. So there are parts of the world which are still haven't quite peaked. You don't open up in those areas, but places where it's done, they're opening up around the world. You're seeing this happen, and the U.S. should absolutely start getting back to work where they can.
Victoria says, Dr. Paul, I believe I got this virus in November. I had weight loss, fatigue, 106 fever, pneumonia, cough for nearly 6 weeks, and SOB. Do you think I had it? Is that possible?
So I've got a question. I think I had this in November with cough, fatigue, lasted for 6 weeks. Could it have been this virus? I think it probably was. Now, what you want to do, I had the same thing. So I had the same illness in November, December. My wife had it in January. Several of my employees and family members had it in January. We're going to test. We're going to get the antibody testing, measure IgG and IgM. It's a blood draw. And if you have great immunity, antibodies, you obviously had it, right? So this is the other type of testing that needs to happen so we can get a sense what percentage of the population already had this and is now immune, and these can be our protective warriors. I really feel like we need to figure that out. I will be testing everybody in my office who's willing. So far, everybody seems willing to find out, because working in a pediatric office through a winter, it's quite likely we were exposed, and I would just be curious to see what percentage of my staff have it, or in other words, had it. Nobody's had symptoms for over a month, so could we open up? I feel like we could. If we find out we're almost all immune, could we open up? Of course. We would be the safest place in town. All the employees would have immunity to this virus. Come on in.
And so Mallory asks, did COVID-19 affect you or your family?
So thank you for your question. Did COVID-19 affect me or my family? My good friend was hospitalized, almost died, but I talk about him in the book. He was the incentive to write the book. My family itself, I have a sister who I think had it. Her symptoms seem classic. Her test came back negative. She's a nurse, works in Boston. I think I had it. I think my wife, my kids, a few of my kids had it, I think, but we haven't proven it yet. Testing was not available, is still not available, but we're going to get the antibody tests hopefully this coming week. I will report back as soon as I have that information. But no, we have not been negatively affected at all. In fact, in my entire practice of over 15,000 patients, we only tested about 10 really sick kids once the kits were available in the past month. They were all negative. So I have not had a single positive in my practice. Does that mean none of those patients had it? I doubt it. I'm pretty sure we're going to have a 2, 5, 10% of my population actually had it. Symptoms were nothing more than a usual flu, and they recovered, and they're now protected. That's my guess. I will report back when I know more.
What are the best foods for boosting immunity?
The best foods for boosting immunity: cruciferous vegetables. Those are your broccoli, cauliflower, greens, and then all the colored fruits and vegetables. Eat the rainbow, as they say. There are so many immune-boosting phytonutrients that we miss out when we limit our diet to just a few things, and especially probably even more important than eating those colorful immune-boosting foods is avoiding sugar and processed foods, which are like immune-busting. They like turn off your immune system for hours. So really stay away from sugar and processed foods. Eat the rainbow. Power up on your fruits and vegetables. Get extra vitamin C. If you can't get sunshine, to get natural vitamin D production, which, folks, it's impossible to make enough vitamin D with sunshine. You're going to get a sunburn before you make enough. Supplement with vitamin D. Supplement with vitamin C. Probably your melatonin as well, within reason. And a lot of other things I've covered in the book.
Madison says, how long have you been practicing medicine?
Madison, I've been practicing medicine for over 30 years. I graduated from medical school in 1985 from Dartmouth Medical School, finished my residency in California in 1988, and have been practicing in Portland, Oregon area since that time.
Classy biker chick wants to know, do you know what the COVID-19 guidelines are during labor and delivery?
So my classy person, I can't remember your whole biker. Hey, I'm riding a Kawasaki Vulcan these days. Used to have a Harley, used to have a Honda Goldwing. I'm assuming you're talking about those kind of bikes. All right. Love riding. I am a fair weather rider. I like to hit the corners hard, so I don't like it wet. I just don't like the idea of sliding along the pavement. Anyway, what was the question, boss?
COVID-19 guidelines during labor.
COVID guidelines for labor. The hospitals in my part of the world are testing every mom coming into the hospital now, and you're being put in isolation if you have a positive COVID test. Most hospitals are no longer allowing loved ones into the hospital, and I think that's even applying to labor and delivery. Although I have had several new babies born, and they did allow your partner only to go with you into the hospital. So that might vary hospital to hospital depending on how much COVID is in your community. But isolation is something you're going to have to be willing to have happen anytime you go into the hospital. I had a good friend went in for an arrhythmia last night, hospitalized, her partner couldn't go with her. It's like amazing.
Super chat from 396 Chevy Girl. Can a flu shot cause spasms? My 6-month-old got the shot and hours later had spasms. The spasms were confirmed not to be seizures.
So thank you for the super chat. And can a shot cause spasms that weren't seizures? I would say yes. I don't know what you mean by the spasms, but we know vaccines, including the flu shot, can cause fever. We know you can have shakes and chills and tremors from high fevers. Seizures tend to be more jerky and rhythmic or tonic, where you're stiff. It doesn't sound like that's what happened, but if it was, right after a vaccine, yes, association doesn't mean causation, but you have to think that it probably was related. It makes sense, right? If I eat a food and I get hives, I'm going to say I'm allergic to that food. If you take a vaccine and you get a reaction, we ought to say it probably was from the vaccine. It's just sort of common sense that gets thrown out the window by a lot of people.
Super chat from the Dusters Bust.
Thank you, Dusters Bust.
Hello, Dr. Paul. My son is a patient of yours. His last blood draw lab report says his vitamin D points were 34.3 nanograms per milliliter. Deficiency at 4 years, 41 pounds. He's been given 1 drop of vitamin D3K2 for 6 months. Is he at risk?
So we've got a young child with a vitamin D level of 34. Normal is 30 to 100. 34 is better than most, believe it or not. So no, you are not at huge risk. This was a young child who is taking 1,000 IUs a day, I believe. I would double it to 2,000. You want to try to get what I consider optimal, and a lot of integrative physicians agree with me, is about 50 to 80 nanograms per deciliter. So if you're sitting below 50, just up your dose a little bit. But no, that's That's better than most, and just tweak it up a little bit.
Super chat with no question. Super chat with no questions from Ardia Tandon.
Thank you, Ardia Tandon. Appreciate the support. Keeps that guy behind the scenes working.
Crazy Chris asks, what is a good remedy for tongue ties?
Crazy Chris, wondering about tongue ties. So, when you stick your tongue out, there's a little membrane that goes right up the middle, and you can get that clipped just with sterile scissors. I had mine clipped when I was in college. My son clipped his own when he was a teenager. He's laughing behind the scenes here. With not sterile scissors, like, oh. Anyway, he survived it to tell the story. I clip a lot of tongues, that sort of clip, with sterile scissors in the office for infants, newborns. There is a different kind of tongue tie. If you'll look at my hand here, and the tongue used to be this long, so you could stick your tongue out your mouth, and now it's attached here, right, up near the front. They actually call it a posterior tongue tie. That can be dealt with laser. It's a little tiny little gadget. It almost looks like a pen, and it just unzips it and creates a little diamond shape where the tongue gets loosened up. And sometimes if your tongue tie is severely affecting breastfeeding, you can have that done by people who do that. It can be either ears, nose, and throat. In our town, there's a couple ear, nose, and throat docs who do it, and a dentist or two who do this. But you have to have the laser, and you have to be willing to massage that wound so it doesn't just scar back down. Otherwise, don't bother. You're just going to create a more intense tie, right? Wounds heal by scarring. So it does take some parental willingness to cause pain many times a day.
Creative Joe asks, my husband wants to know, he's had cancer, he's fought cancer all of his life, chemo, radiation, etc. I'd like to know if any of this will affect him from fighting the virus if he gets it.
So, Joe, was it? Creative Joe. Thanks for your question. It's a really good one. Those of you who have struggled with cancer, I've got many friends who've been through this same thing. During the battle, if you're on chemotherapy, for example, your immune system is intentionally suppressed. And that is a time you need to have very, very strict quarantine. Don't let anybody near you who could be sick. When you come out of that chemo and your white blood cells are back to normal, especially if you're supplementing with all the healthy foods, and a lot of times you are actually doing better than most because you've realized the value of a healthy immune system, you're probably fine, honestly. I mean, you're still going to be extra careful because, you're kind of wondering, well, why did I get cancer to begin with, right? And so is there something you just aren't aware of that's putting you at higher risk? So yes, be careful, but don't be fearful. If your white blood cell count is back to normal, it is your lymphocytes that are that first line of defense against a novel virus, and chances are you know that your lymphocytes are fine because you've been tested. So no, you don't need to walk around in fear. Just be extra careful. Hands to face, no.
DJ Southpaw. Question. Hi, Dr. Paul. I love your videos. What about taking licorice root, cordyceps, and angiographies COVID-19? And if so, do you offer them on Metagenics page?
Gotcha. I wish you could say that out loud because I'm not going to repeat that quite as nicely. But
DJ Southpaw. Question. Hi, Dr. Paul. Love your videos. What about taking licorice root, cordyceps, and
andrographies? I'm not sure what that is. You can search on my Wellevate. This is true for all of you who are watching. Wellevate.me/Dr. Paul, DRPAUL. You can get my professional discount at time of checkout. See what they've got available. Most of the top supplement companies are covered by Wellevate. This is the site that most professionals use to refer their patients for quality supplements. Metagenics is there, and I'm pretty sure most of those are available. I've heard of their use for this COVID situation. Those aren't ones that I'm using a lot to be able to talk from personal experience, but thank you for bringing that up.
Wayne Cardy says, me and my daughter were sick in early January and tested negative for the flu. We had all of the flu symptoms. Do you think there's a chance that we already had corona?
Hey, Wayne, I do. So the question was, we were sick in January, tested for the flu, and it was negative. Might we have had corona? Yes. I think a lot of us who had these sorts of illness, and especially when tested and flu negative, if we had a lot of fever, if we had a lot of body aches, good chance, right? Good chance. And then if it went into this cough that was maybe worse than ever, very good chance. I'd say, let's hope you did and that you now have antibodies, because that's the place we want to be, right? Eventually, everybody's going to want to have protection against this COVID-19 infection, the SARS-CoV-2 virus. If you have the antibodies, you're protected. What we don't know is how long that protection is going to last, but generally for this type of virus, this is an RNA virus, which measles, mumps, rubella, those are RNA viruses. Our protection, if you have natural infection with measles, mumps, rubella, is thought to be lifelong. So it's a very good chance that you will have lifelong immunity from having had this infection. So bring it on. Obviously, no, not if you're high risk, but chances are we will eventually have a community that's immune to this thing. It's going to be no more worrisome than any other coronavirus, which typically causes the common cold.
Deep D asks,
hey, Dip D.
Can you tell me what to expect in case of GERD-induced cough for a 3-month-old?
GERD-induced cough for a 3-month-old. So we see this a lot. GERD stands for gastroesophageal reflux disease, and it can be GER without the D. You may or may not add the word disease for it at this age. But basically, when you drink a lot of fluids, it goes down the esophagus, and then there's a muscle right here that keeps what's in the stomach from coming back up. That muscle is loose in babies. You fill that stomach fuller, like a balloon. You've got more pressure. Bloop. You're laying down. Gravity comes out easier. So you will have, the more overfed the baby is, right, the more likely they are to spit up and have choking and coughing. Kids won't die from GERD. They're just going to cough and sputter, and you're going to worry, but they'll be fine. And smaller, more frequent feeds helps, right? So you're not getting that balloon so full. So just being aware of their weight gain, making sure they're gaining enough, but that they're not having such high volumes at a time, at a feeding, such as to cause more of those symptoms.
Angel asks, what kind of vitamins do you recommend?
Angel, what kind of vitamins do I recommend? I highly recommend a vitamin D3 with K2. Metagenics makes a great 5,000 IU and 10,000 IU for adults who need that much. There's Orthomolecular makes a liquid drops that's 1,000 with K2, and there's a new one out, one or two others that are now making it with K2. So that's your D right now, and until we're done with this thing, added C. And then I like methylated B vitamins in general. There's only about 5% people who don't do as well with the methyl B12 methylfolate, but in general that's a good idea. Boosting the immune system, I'm really having good luck with Mitocor, made by Orthomolecular, and it's got N-acetylcysteine to boost your glutathione, carnitine to give your cells energy, the right B vitamins, and a lot of other important nutrients that are immune boosting. And I've left out some others, but you're going to want a little bit of zinc in there if you're fighting infections this time, a little bit of selenium, and check out the book. I talk about a lot of this in my book, COVID-19, that's just now going to be available on Kindle, and you can request it at drpaulapproved.com.
MLA Norton says, how do I get my dad to stay home? He's 52, he has respiratory issues, and he's stubborn as a mule.
Oh,
He
dear.
insists on going out for unnecessary stuff.
Emily, how do I get my dad to stay home? You know, my own kids were worried about me because I was going to work, right? And if you watch the news, the sky's falling and I'm going to die, right? I'm high risk. I'm over 60. I'm a male, and I'm going to work around all these sick people. Dad. Now, that said, it is a very tricky thing when your loved one is higher risk and they're taking unnecessary risks, right? I don't know how we can get through to people to be careful. The main thing I would say is that if he can consider the fact that anything he touches has COVID on it, and he cannot touch his face or his body or bring that into the house without going straight to the sink and washing his hands, he'll probably be all right, right? So work on what maybe those little things you can work on that might actually save his life, because some people are going to wear masks and some aren't, and for the most part, it doesn't make a lot of difference. If you're working indoors in a crowded area, yes, it could make a big difference, especially if the prevalence of COVID disease is huge in your community. the closing of parks and beaches in areas that don't have much COVID makes no sense at all. There is zero risk being outdoors far away from other people, right? And yet we're being told stay home and save lives. No, get out and get some exercise and save lives that way, reduce stress, reduce suicide risk, etc. So, one size fits all, we love this, right? One size fits all. Stay home, don't go anywhere. People have to work, people have to get food. Let's be careful, right? But it's a good question.
Super chat from Leanne Clayton.
Thank you, Leanne.
Advice on abscesses. Have HS. I can't get them up.
Abscesses and wanting some advice. So abscesses are generally infections under the skin, like a pus pocket, and the best way to treat an abscess is to open it up so it drains. I think if HS is Henoch-Schönlein and you can't, for fear of bleeding, you can't open them up, that does pose a bit of a problem. That's a little tricky. I think. I don't know. I can't give specific medical advice in that instance, but in general, abscesses will heal very quickly if they're drained. And so you want to get to that point where you feel like you can safely do that. Otherwise, I think you're stuck taking antibiotics, which could be important, but has its own set of problems.
Super chat from Storefront Flips.
Thank you, Storefront Flips.
Hello, Dr. Paul. My 11-month-old daughter doesn't want her baby milk anymore. Her teeth are coming out. She doesn't even want to see her bottle. She starts crying. What can we do to keep her hydrated?
Okay, so we got an 11-month-old who doesn't want their bottle, starts crying when you approach with a bottle. What can we do to keep hydrated? I would say you go with fruits that are high in water content. I mean, watermelon is almost all water. Most of the melons are almost all water. You just start eating lots and lots of fruits, natural vegetables. You're going to get a lot of fluids that way. And, sometimes you can put a splash of fresh squeezed orange or something in some water to make it a little more palatable. That's always a good thing. We don't want to do a bunch of store-bought canned juices. I would stay away from that, and definitely no soda. But, yeah, see what you can do with natural fruits. That would be my best advice.
Ryan Sims asks, how do you stop a child with ADHD from biting soft items and even people?
So the question was, how do you stop a child with ADHD from biting soft items or people? Any behavior that you're trying to get rid of, the key actually is not giving that behavior a lot of attention, because behaviors that get attention will continue to happen. So I used to crack my knuckles as a kid. My parents, stop that, stop. Well, I just kept cracking them. I don't know, maybe I loved getting the attention. I had two kids who fought incessantly for years until my oldest son, the guy behind the camera, says to me, Dad, do you know they only do that when you're home? What? I said, he says, ask everybody. I asked, and it turns out when I was home, that's when they fought. Why? Because I was pretty even keeled most of the time, but if I think you're going to hurt each other, I'm like, stop. Well, they got my attention. So you want to do a technique called redirect. Go to the window, open up those shades, go, oh my goodness, and point out whatever you're seeing. And whoever was about to do some behavior, biting soft objects or other people, they're like redirected, right? So I would always use a redirect first rather than saying no, and try not to give it attention unless it's life-threatening.
Cassandra Cross says, how long did it take you to become a pediatrician, and was it worth all of that time and money?
Cassandra Cross, how long did it take to become a pediatrician? Was it worth all that time and money? In my case, it was absolutely worth it because I love what I do. Now, if I was a regular pediatrician, I don't know if I could say that. Here's what's exciting about what I do. I stay on the cutting edge of new information regardless of what mainstream thinks about it, okay? If I was just being a mainstream robot following protocols, I would be bored out of my mind, and no, I don't think I would say it was worth it. But when you are constantly learning and changing and adapting and trying to help people get well and healthy and focused on wellness and root causes of illness, it's amazingly exciting. I mean, there is so much to know. I never get to the end of it. I'm like constantly like, the more you know, the more you don't know. That's exciting. It took 12 years of high school, 6 years of college because I didn't get in after my bachelor's. I had to get a master's first, 4 years of medical school, and 3 more years of residency. I was about 29, I think, when I got done with that journey. It's a long road. And I didn't enjoy hardcore academics. Who loves taking tests, right? And after high school, I mean, it's just test taking and grades and endless it seems. But if you can find a way to enjoy the journey, do it. I mean, if you're passionate, right? Follow your passion, do something you love, and you'll be fine.
Keisha Charles asks, my son is almost 4 months old. He's teething. What can I do to soothe his pain at night?
Keisha's asking about 4-month-old with teething pain, what to do to soothe him at night. Well, that's rough. I would say do not use Tylenol. Acetaminophen blocks glutathione, our major detox molecule. It's absolutely the worst thing to do during a COVID outbreak. And yet I hear it on the news all the time. You don't take ibuprofen. There are other reasons to be cautious about ibuprofen. It has to do with the ACE receptors, and it might be actually letting COVID attach a little more better entry into your body. So you probably should avoid ibuprofen. That one's controversial. But you should definitely not be taking acetaminophen Tylenol. So what can you use? Well, something for them to suck on or gnaw on. I know we don't want them to become thumb suckers, but maybe a pacifier, if they can kind of adapt to that, you can get rid of it later. And then just comfort. I mean, if you're breastfeeding, you breastfeed. If you're not, you just cuddle and rock and walk the floor. And I know it's impossible, but you got to do something to comfort them. I mean, they're in pain. It's no fun. It's not their fault.
Super chat from MD Mizamudin.
MD Mizamudin, thank you.
Child vaccine during COVID, is this a good idea or a bad idea?
So this question of should I get my child's vaccines during COVID comes up a lot. And even the Academy of Pediatrics has sent us mixed messages on what's the best approach. You don't want to be bringing healthy kids into an office where they might get exposed to COVID, right? That makes sense. So just based on that, most pediatricians, to my knowledge, are choosing to say, you know what, you can hold off on the routine vaccines. We can get you caught up later. I think that makes sense because even if you're following the CDC schedule, those diseases for which we have vaccines are so rare today, in this day and age, that your risk of going without them for a period of time is pretty minuscule. You've got to balance that against what's the risk of getting COVID if I go into the doctor's office. And those are both sort of rare but unknown risks. Now, in my own practice, where a lot of my patients choose to delay vaccines anyway, it's a lot easier for them. They're just happy to delay them. They almost see that as a benefit. They don't have to hassle with that rough choice. It's a tough decision. When to vaccinate, which ones to give. I wrote the book, The Vaccine Friendly Plan, to help people sort of think about which ones are most important, which ones maybe you don't want to delay, etc. I'll have new information coming out soon on health outcomes from my practice over the last 10 years, comparing the unvaccinated, who are that way by parent choice. We honor informed consent, which is something that's going away rapidly, folks. Be alert to this. If we give up our right to bodily integrity, I think it's game over.
Super Rice asks, are there foods that can specifically fight off viruses and provide antibodies?
Foods that can specifically fight off viruses or provide antibodies. Well, the answer is a big yes, and the list is a huge list. The specific part of it's I'm struggling with a little more. There may be some herbalists who are better qualified to answer that than I am. I know there are certain mushrooms that specifically boost the immune system. All the vitamin C containing foods are an absolute boost to your immune system, right? Fish oil, omega-3 fatty acids will help your immune system. Fermented foods will help the immune system by balancing the gut, and I could probably go on and on, right? I mean, the nuts that what are the nuts that have selenium? Those bigger ones. Oh, I'm drawing a little blank on them. Anyway, you guys know they're the biggest nuts there are out there. Brazilian nuts. Thank you. See, my co-producer nails that one. That's the best source of selenium, which is a great immune booster. And so you can look at each of the nutrients that are important for the immune system and then look up which nutrients boost those. Which foods boost those, and you'll see it's usually fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, fish for the omega-3 fatty acids, and fermented foods for your biome.
Samir Zaru says, if you can't use either Tylenol or ibuprofen, what can you do for fever or pain in older kids and adults?
So it's a good question. If you can't use Tylenol or ibuprofen, what are you going to do for older kids for fever or pain? Turmeric is a great anti-inflammatory. You can put it with honey and some warm water and kind of make it into a turmeric tea. A lot of cooking uses turmeric, so you can put a lot of it in your food if you wish. That's a great one. If you're in a crisis with high fever, sponging yourself down works amazing. So when you get a wet washcloth and you just get yourself damp all over and let that water that you've put on the body evaporate, bam, it brings the fever down. So if you're in a crisis situation, sponge that fever down, lukewarm water, let it just dab it on and let it evaporate, and it works amazing.
Tracy asks, I wear masks when I need to go to the grocery store, but some have made comments saying that these homemade ones are worthless, and I don't even want to wear one. What are your thoughts?
So, masks when you go to the grocery store, and are homemade masks worthless? No, they're not. So I have a slide on my talk that I will be uploading to all of you in this next week. I'm going to send out an email. If you're on my email list, you'll get it, promoting a summit, Health Freedom Summit. And my talk has a slide on it that shows the various types of masks and how good they are at filtering out COVID-19, for example. And surgical masks are, I believe it was 95% effective. So that's not even an N95, just a regular surgical mask. And at the bottom of the list was a cotton bandana for about 49% effective. Hey, it's 49%. I've got another slide that shows when someone sneezes and coughs, what happens to what they're expressing when you cover it with your hand versus your sleeve versus the best thing was actually a kerchief, right? Or you might imagine a mask. That did the best job at not having that go way out into the air and exposing everybody around you. So absolutely, wear your bandanas. We're going to be the new Society of Bandits. I'm not a fan of them, honestly. I'm not, but I'm probably going to do it just so people don't give me weird looks. So we're searching. We had a good one and we lost it. I think the comments come and roll pretty fast, so my producer's doing his best. If we've missed your comment, it was not intentional. I'm not seeing them, so I'm just chatting with you. And my producer's scrolling through them and trying to catch them as fast as he can. And so definitely our apologies if we missed you. It was not intentional.
Joanna Melkor says, my son is 10 months old. When can I wean him off of formula? He always needs a bottle to sleep and one bottle in the middle of the night. I'm afraid he won't leave it. The formula is expensive.
Joanna's got a 10-month-old who loves his formula bottles. So I had my youngest son loved his bottles. I mean, he wouldn't go down without one, but we were way past 12 months. Now, you're supposed to wean off the bottle between 12 and 15 months, and it wasn't happening. So I finally just put water in it because I was mostly worried about the teeth. If you've got that nipple sitting on the teeth and it's got milk and, God forbid, juice in a bottle, it's just promoting bacterial growth around the teeth and tooth decay. So we finally put water in the bottle. I gave it to him. He was still in the crib at that point. He tossed it. He was so mad. He didn't want water. He wanted his formula. Well, I gave it back to him after a while of crying, and he tossed it. He was still mad. So I put it up on a shelf for a couple hours and let him scream for a while. He finally took it, wasn't that interested, and within a few days or weeks, he was done with bottles. Now, yours is a slightly different situation. How long are you supposed to take formula? Up to 12 months. You're at 11 months. You're pretty close. If you've got a great diet with lots and lots of fruits and vegetables and other sources of nutrients, it's not that big of a deal as long as you're tracking his weight. Obviously, check this out with his doctor. You can probably get rid of that formula. Certainly by a year, you're almost there. And just replace it with water. And if he doesn't like water, hopefully, as one of our other guests was asking, hey, summer's coming, melons. Get your fluids that way.
Mental health question from C. Marie.
C. Marie,
She wants
thank
to
you.
know what you can do if you struggle badly with anxiety during times like this. She's not doing well.
So struggling with anxiety, what can you do during times like this? Thank you for that. Is a really important question. And I've been so worried about folks who are at greatest risk of mood disorders, anxiety, depression, feeling suicidal. Isolation is the worst thing, which is why I just don't like this stay-home orders like there's something wrong with going outside. So I would say unless you're going to get arrested, go outside. take a walk, get out in the sunshine if there's some sunshine, and try to stay as connected as you can with people who care about you, because even though we're supposed to be, they call it social distancing, really it's physical distancing that's what matters. We need to be socially connected. So do everything you can to, do everything.
It's not a big deal. Just address it. Yeah.
Do everything. I have my phone. I forgot to put it on silent. Do everything you can to do self-care. Okay. Number one, you've got to get your sleep. I mean, we don't do well when we're sleep deprived. I use melatonin. I actually use a product called Tranquil. It's got melatonin, theanine, and 5-HTP, and it works wonderful. I take 10 milligrams most nights, an hour before I want to be asleep, and very rarely I'll even take an extra dose in the middle of the night if I'm having a rough night. Again, not intending to diagnose or treat on this platform, but guard your sleep if at all possible. Try to eat healthy. Try to get those fruits and vegetables and stay away from those inflammatory foods. But most importantly, reach out for help and go. I mean, if anybody who's watching this is at that jumping off place, go to the ER. I mean, just go get help, or at least call and find out where's the safest place to go to get help. There are online resources that can talk you off the ledge if you're at that jumping off place. But reach out, get outside, get some exercise, get some sleep, try to eat well, try to get a routine. Routines are very helpful, and then anything you can do to meditate, be mindful, and turn off the news. Turn off those stressors that all they're saying is it's getting worse when it's actually getting better. It's really starting to get frustrating. I watch the news every day because I've been writing this book on COVID, and I want to be up to date, and they only talk about the bad things. There are so many places where things are already coming out. We're at the very end of our peak. I mean, it's not just peaked, it's almost over. And they're not sharing that. So it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay real soon, even though there's a lot of resistance for other reasons, I believe, to letting people free. So try to free your soul, free your being, free your spirit. Know that you're going to be okay. You can get through this, and you're not alone.
Super chat from Steph.
Hi, thank you, Steph.
Gates wants everyone to get the COVID vaccine. What do you think?
Gates wants everybody to get the COVID vaccine. You know what? I watched this episode on OPB. I'm ready to get rid of OPB. He was on there for about 15 minutes talking like he was the world's guru, the leading expert on vaccines, saying things like nobody's going to be able to get back to work until we have everybody vaccinated. They asked him a question about, well, what do you think about the businesses that are struggling? When are we going to be able to get people safely back to work? He says, well, I don't know much about business like I do about vaccines. No, actually, I think he said, I'm not an expert in business as I am in vaccines. Dr. Gates, where's your MD? How many children have you taken care of? Holy moly. No. So Bill Gates is the second richest man in the world who wants to vaccinate every living, walking soul with vaccines that he's been meddling with, and he seems to have a very tight connection with the WHO. There's this thing between pharma and CDC, and Fauci, who's been a vaccine guy, Fauci, who's on the news all the time, was actually working on SARS vaccines in the past, the ones that failed, the ones that when they injected them in animals and those animals were infected in the future, they died, right? So they're going to come out with a vaccine. Yes, they will. They're going to try to mandate it, and people who get it will likely, next season around, have a very hard time. It could be very scary. Unless it's been safety tested through at least a full year of illnesses and another round of COVID-19 infections, not for me. No. So there are actually very pro-vaccine people like Paul Offit, for example, who is throwing out huge caution warnings. He's afraid that people, because of their fear, are going to be willing to take a dangerous vaccine. This coming from Paul Offit, the number one proponent of vaccines. He's worried that there's not going to be a safe vaccine. That should tell you everything right there. Just no. You got to draw a line in the sand. You got to see what's coming, folks. I'm not saying this isn't a bad illness. It is bad. It's not nearly as bad as they're making it out to be. It's probably, when the dust settles, a little worse than the worst flu we've had. And it's only going to get better and better each year because more and more of the population will be immune. We're going to know how to deal with it, both how to avoid it, how to treat it, and who can get it safely so we boost our herd immunity. Sorry, I went off a little bit.
Shout out to Nikki H.
Shout out to Nikki H.
5-minute warning.
5-minute warning, y'all. My taskmaster's on it today.
Alex Thompson asks, how do you get rid of bad acne? Because I've tried medications and it's not working.
So bad acne, how do you get rid of it? Medication's not working. You know, acne is a bacterial infection, but it is almost always made worse by certain, if you have really high testosterone levels, for example, that can do it. Certain pubertal hormonal changes can certainly put you at higher risk. But your diet, if you got rid of gluten and dairy, and you got rid of all processed foods, and you were eating like crystal clear, healthy, organic produce, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, I'd be shocked if in a few months your acne wasn't like almost completely gone. You can still do, there's a lot of different skin treatments that will help you exfoliate and sort of you regrow new healthy skin under it. It's sort of a way of sort of just shedding the infection. Those approaches are obviously worth doing as well. And in very rare cases, you do have to hammer it with antibiotics and some of the more aggressive stuff. But honestly, I would tackle it with the diet first.
Super chat from Maria Gonzalez.
Thank you, Maria.
She says, I have a 7-month-old nephew. He recently has had to have a helmet put on him. Once we put it on him, we noticed his right eye was drooping. Should we stop putting it on?
So a 7-month-old who needed a helmet and now his right eye is drooping. I would get that looked at because the right eye should not be drooping due to the helmet. Unless the helmet is somehow so incredibly tight that it's pinching on a nerve that's affecting the right eye. Your droop, so that's your cranial nerve 7 that holds your eye up. I doubt that's related to the helmet. So you got to wonder about what's causing cranial nerve 7 not to work right. Is this a viral infection? Is this something else? So, double back with your neurologist, pediatric neurologist, and see what they say.
Super chat from Bethany Bailey.
Thank you, Bethany.
We have 3 kids, one with severe ADHD, autism, and the MTHFR mutation, the other with severe ADHD, anxiety, and the MTHFR mutation. We vaxxed both of them. Would you not recommend that we vax our third? She's 1 year, no vaccines.
So you have 3 children. The first 2 were vaccinated, and one has autism, one has severe ADHD, and your third child's a year old, has not been vaccinated, and it sounds like they're doing fine. I have hundreds of families in my practice with your story. And what they have done is chosen not to continue to vaccinate when they've seen what vaccines do given the risk factors that they carry. MTHFR is one of the risk factors known to make vaccines more dangerous. So what they've chosen to do is exactly what you've chosen to do with your last child, and they've been very happy with that decision. So it seems reasonable. I can't give medical advice on this platform, but you're living with what you're living with, and you're already seeing it looks like what I've seen over and over and over again. The unvaccinated children are hands down the healthiest. They're not having asthma, eczema. They're not having ear infections. They're even not having accidents, I think, because who knows, maybe all the ADHD, autism, unawareness of your environment is causing vaccinated kids to have more accidents, or is it affecting their sensory stuff? Who knows? They're clearly having less ADD, ADHD, and the number of autism in my practice is so low, it's not statistically significant to look at that particular variable. But I have hundreds of autistic kids in my practice who joined after their kids became autistic, and the universal story almost to a family, to a person, is they got vaccines, and then their kid regressed. So there you have it.
Super chat from Daniel Iglesias. Just saying,
thank you, Daniel.
Just saying I love your channel. Go ahead and give closing statements, sir.
So I'm to close up, y'all. Thank you for another Sunday. Check out Paul. I'm Paul. Check out drpaulapproved.com. There is a link so you can get a free download to my book, COVID-19 Life-Saving Strategies They Won't Tell You in the Media. So This book has been a labor of love the past month, and it's now ready. It should be on Amazon by tomorrow for Kindle and the end of the week. If you want to get it's colorful. If you want to get a nice paperback, you can also order that. That'll help support me and a lot of the work I'm trying to do. But you can get it for free, and I want you to share that with the world. People are suffering unnecessarily. Our world is going to face, at the end of 2020, come next fall, most likely we will be faced with the biggest challenge from the powers that be, the powers that have brought the world to their knees. We have pharma, CDC, WHO, Bill Gates, all working together, and in the name of public health, they have shut down the world. How about that? And what if we come to find out this really wasn't that much worse than the flu? Now, don't get me wrong. People who've had this, like my friend Bud, this was no flu, okay? So there's something that's really serious about COVID-19, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but I'm just saying, what if the magnitude of this? I mean, in Oregon, 4 million people, our curve is almost done. We've had 70 cases, I think 72 as of last night, out of 4 million people. We have over 8,000 people dying each year of cancer, heart disease. I mean, this is like a little drop, just the tiniest little blip, and we've shut down the economy. So, respect the virus, don't fear it, be careful out there. Thank you to all our frontline workers. I really am grateful that you are doing what you're doing. And for those of you at home, try not to be afraid. Try to find some peace in all of this. Reach out to your loved ones. It's physical isolation, not social isolation. And lots of love from my family to yours. I'm Dr. Paul.